All right. Thank you very much, Michael, for that wonderful introduction. I think I will show my face briefly before I switch to screen share. Because I'm working from a laptop, my face is a bit of dark because of the quality of the laptop camera. But like he rightly pointed out, I've won a couple of scholarships and I found it as a passion to, you know, engage with young people, to try to teach young people how to win scholarships, especially those of us who come from developing countries. And it's just a very simple. There's someone whose background is really noisy. Um, Chinwendu, Chinwendu, please, can you mute yourself? All right. Okay. So the I found it as a passion to help people from especially developing countries just to be able to, help people get to know how these scholarships work and how to go about applying for them and all that. Now, there are a few things we're going to discuss, and I would like you to give me your maximum attention as I go through this conversation. uh, I don't intend to do the general talks that you hear every day. I want to do some things that are really specific. And as much as I will be talking from slides, I would like you to pay attention more to the things I will say because the slides are just a guiding point. And thank you very much, Michael, for organizing this. I see this as something very interesting and something every student leader should be doing. Now, without wasting much of our time, in the recent, I would like to just give a few corrections. I am a well engineer, but not the water wells. It's more of the oil and gas wells. And although the principles are more or less the same, it's just that in oil and gas wells you expect higher temperatures and higher pressures, but it's almost the same principle. Then I'm also just in the process of getting my doctorate and still pursuing that. Now, let's go into the slides and then see what we are up to today. Um I hope we can all just still hear me. If you can hear me, just give that indication in the chat box. At the end of everything, we're going to have a session for questions and answers. And then that will be the period when you can discuss, ask your questions, and you will get answers to all of them. Now, let's look at these things and then we will start from this position. So let's have a little bit of a brainstorm. All of these are just adverts, and then let's have a brainstorm, a very short brainstorm. Now, you are probably in your first year, your second year, your third year, or your fourth year, I don't know. But regardless of the level in which you are as a student, there is a point where you begin to think and you need to start thinking about your future just right now. And your future can be in one direction, it can be in a different direction, depending where Michael's future is, may not be where your own future is. And for some people, their future might be somewhere in business. They might have some business ideas that they want to run. For some other persons, their future might be in further education. For some other persons, their future might be in just any other thing that is, they are trying to chase and trying to pursue in life. But the point is this, you need to start from that point of identifying something. And then I want to believe that since we're all here today, we have identified scholarships as something that we need, and then we have identified further education as the pathway for us to make progress. Now, every young person, I'm just building up to something, this is a start. Every young person will have a period in his life when the person or a period in his life or her life when the person is done with school, and that transition period becomes a very important one. The questions will be, should I do this, should I do that, what direction should I take? But there are several directions. However, like the laws of physics would say, there is action, and then there is an equal and opposite reaction. So the choice, for instance, to go to the particular university you are in today has its consequences and benefits down the line. I understand that this is one of the only, maybe one of the few, if not the only English speaking university in Cameroon. I'm not from Cameroon, I come from Nigeria, but then Cameroon has always been our neighbor. And I've got to know a couple of persons from Cameroon and then have some knowledge about the country as well. Now, if you choose, for instance, to go and further your studies, there are consequences and there are options. Some people will choose to take what is called a gap year, where the person just decides to rest, and some other persons will go straight into work. All of these have their advantages and their benefits. But we want to define our paths as a people. And today, what we're trying to look at is the further study options. All of these other ones are pathways that anybody could go to. Somebody can choose to go do further studies, to find job, to go into entrepreneurship, to go into some additional skill acquisition, to take a career break. All of these are like things that somebody can decide to do after school. But we want to focus specifically on further studies today, and it's for a reason. Now, when you decide to do your further studies, it becomes clear to you that you need to either pay for it or somebody needs to pay for it. So if you are choosing to pay for further studies by yourself, that's take a master's degree and pay for your master's degree by yourself, or decide to go and then take maybe you realize that the cost of paying for master's degree or for any PhD abroad can be really very expensive. You might, in my own institution, for instance, will pay around £16,000 per year for the master's programs and then for the PhD programs. I don't know what the exchange rate is in Cameroon, but in Nigeria, £16,000 should be somewhere close to, it's over 30 million naira. Based on the current exchange rate. This is a lot of money. It's not every can afford it. And that's why you want to start looking at scholarship opportunities, you want to start looking at fellowships, you want to start looking at grants. Parental support should come in if you cannot win the first three. But the first three they are the concept, or they are the base of this conversation today. Now, there are some myths and there are some realities about scholarship. This is where I will begin to spend some time, in the subsequent slides. You'll see me spending more time per slide trying to talk us through this. I understand some people are watching this event on YouTube, and then, but the YouTube people, you are not seeing the slides. So you just pay attention and follow. Now, the thing is this. There are a lot of persons that will tell you that you can't win a scholarship if you don't have connections. This is just a statement that's not founded on anything. It's not true. It's not a reality. Some other persons will tell you that you must have a first class before you can win any scholarship. This is also not true. It's also not a reality, because I know people who have come with second class uppers. I know people who have even won scholarships with second class lowers. It's just that the number of work or the amount of work the person will have to do will differ, right? Then the other thing is, there are a lot of persons who will tell you that your country does not qualify for scholarships abroad. So somebody will tell you that it's the Chinese, or it's the Indians, or it's the Nigerians, or it's the Kenyans, or some South Africans, that they are the only ones that win scholarships. This is also not true, because there are lots of people from Cameroon who have won scholarships. In fact, recently I read a story of one guy from Cameroon who has won like 5 scholarships, for his PhD at the same time. This is just one person winning up to 5. And if one person can win up to 5, then you can also win some for yourself. The other myth is, most people will tell you that you need to write an English language test exam before you can apply. Well, this is true to some extent, but it's not completely true, because there are institutions that will let you gain admission and even win a scholarship without having to go through the English language test. There are, of course, some other things that you may be able to do, or you may be required to do in order to make this kind of progress. You may need to write some papers. You may need to get a letter from your school that confirms that you did your previous study in English, and all of those kind of things. But these are things that people will tell you that are not necessarily the truth. Now, what is true? A first class is not compulsory for winning scholarships, right? For crying out loud. A first class It's not compulsory for winning scholarships. It's good, and you will realize that if you have a first class, your journey to a scholarship can be easier. It can be made, faster. It can be fast tracked and all that. But it's not as if somebody who doesn't have a first class cannot win scholarship. So if you are following this conversation and you are not on a first class, scholarships are still for you. The other thing is this: if you don't have a first class, then you need to become more strategic in your planning. You need to start planning better than those who have the first class degrees. You need to now start thinking of what skills are relevant to your course, what skills are relevant to that course you want to study in your further education. Then the other thing is you can start thinking of your publications, because if you're able to write a journal paper that gets published in an English journal, then you can always present that journal paper as evidence of your knowledge of English language. This is something I've done myself. And in my case, I had my bachelor's and my master's in Russia, where English was not the language of instruction. But because I got some papers published in English journals, and then I did some kind of work in a university where English was the language of instruction back in Nigeria, I was able to put these together and then present it to the university as my evidence of knowledge of English language. And it was accepted in both University of Aberdeen and Robert Gordon University here also in Aberdeen. I didn't have to write an English language test to get admission or to come into those schools. Now, it begins to get more points. There are scholarships, but how do you really identify the scholarship options that you have? You get to know the scholarship options that you have. Now, the first thing is this. You need to think of scholarships in this format. Scholarships can either be from the government or from the institutions themselves. So you can win a scholarship that's coming directly from your government. You can also win a scholarship that's not coming from your government, right? So some scholarships will come from institutions, and these are the scholarships that are generally referred to as graduate assistantships. Graduate assistantships. So when you think of graduate assistantships, you are thinking of all the postgraduate studies funded by the university and funded by the school you are intending to go into, right? So if you have that school that you have identified as the place you want to go to, and the school is going to offer maybe like a scholarship that covers your tuition, that's what is called graduate assistantship. The graduate assistantships abroad will cover your tuition, and then it will give you some amount of money to cover your living expenses. I know that recently I looked at the website of your school and I saw an advert for graduate assistants that was like a 3 months program or a 3 months job. The graduate assistantship I'm talking about here is a longer term project. This will give you like 2 years. If you're going for a PhD, to give you like 3 years. Some will give you maybe like 1 year to cover the full cost of your education in the country you are going to study. And this is something that's readily available in most developed countries. Whether you're going to the United States of America, to the United Kingdom, you're going to Australia, to Canada, and all of that. Now, the US has got like the largest number of graduate assistantships anywhere in the world. And I want to emphasize this for a reason. So if you are looking for graduate assistantships, one of your main target countries should be the United States of America. And the reason is simple. The United States alone has probably more universities than, let's say, maybe the biggest. If you combine the number of universities, say in the UK, in Germany, in France, they may not be able to match the number of institutions in the United States alone. And then graduate assistantships are tied to institutions and tied to the number of professors in the school. So you can almost imagine that if you have this number of institutions with an increased number of professors, then you're beginning to have more graduate assistantship opportunities. And there is a way you approach this. We're going to see that in the next couple of slides, how to approach graduate assistantships in order to win them. But apart from the graduate assistantships, let's behave like they do not exist just for a moment and focus on some of the other scholarships that are externally funded. When I say externally funded, I mean they could be funded by the government of your country, and they could be funded by some other organizations outside. So you may have heard of Chevening Scholarship, for instance. If you know Chevening Scholarship, just if you have heard about this scholarship, let me know in the comments or in the chat box that you've heard about it. Just say yes. Then there is Commonwealth. And Commonwealth and Chevening are two scholarships that are meant for Commonwealth countries. But I know that Cameroon qualifies for Commonwealth Scholarship and for Chevening Scholarship. Now, this other one here is PTDF. This is basically for Nigerians. It's just one of those scholarships that an organization in Nigeria funds. Now, there is all the other foreign government scholarships. Remember, we've mentioned that the government of your country can be funding some scholarships. And I remember that when I was in Russia, I met about two Cameroonians in my school, or three Cameroonians in my school, two boys and then a lady. And I think the two guys were on government scholarship. I may be correct. I may not be absolutely correct on this, but the much I remember, I think they were on scholarships from the government of Cameroon. So you may want to explore your government. Ideally, this kind of scholarships will be within the Ministry of Education or the scholarship board of the country. I don't know which one is particular within Cameroon, but you may want to explore it. But beyond those ones that are for your country, you want to also look at the other scholarships that are coming from foreign countries. For instance, there is a scholarship that's funded by the Irish government. That's the government of Ireland. There is also a scholarship that's funded by the Swedish Institute. That's from the Swedish government in Switzerland. There is also a scholarship that's funded by one institution in KAUST. This is by the government of Saudi Arabia. KAUST is one of the top most research institutions in the Middle East. There's also some other kind of scholarships like the Gates Foundation Scholarship, like the MasterCard Foundation Scholarship, like the Rhodes Scholarship. There are a whole lot of scholarships in all of these parts of the world. In France, there's also a scholarship there. And then, of course, most of the guys from Cameroon that I know would speak English and would speak French. So if you're looking at English-speaking countries, you can also be looking at the French-speaking countries. This is an additional benefit to those of you who are able to speak French and speak English at the same time. Now, if we have identified all these scholarship opportunities, there are quite a number of them. I can't list all the scholarships that exist. But for instance, if you are looking for a scholarship to apply for and you can't find it, if you don't find this list enough, you can just look at scholarships for, or you can go to Google and type master's degree scholarships in the United States, or master's scholarship for international students in the US, or master's degree scholarships for international students in France, or master's degree scholarships for international students in Germany. And once you begin to do these kind of searches, you begin to find a whole lot of information and a whole lot of scholarships that are available to you that you can apply for just today. So let's begin to now go into the documents you require for your international scholarship. This is very basic, but I do a lot of discussions about scholarships on Academy of Scholarships and Transition because we're just having 1 hour for this whole conversation. We might not be able to go into all the details, but look at the first thing, international scholarships, and then tied to that is your international passport. This is usually a non-negotiable. You know, some of the other documents like the language test you see here are negotiable. It's not every institution that will require them. There are ways you can go around it. You can maybe use some other alternatives to them. You can use, instead of IELTS, there are some other kind of language tests you might be able to write that are cheaper. But your international passport is constant. You can't do without it. So usually I advise people in the university and people who have just graduated to make a plan for international passport. I don't know the cost of international passport in Cameroon, but it shouldn't be so expensive, especially if you're able to plan towards it. So you need to set out a plan that understands that in the next year or in the next 2 years, you will be ready to apply for international scholarship opportunities. And this is one of the documents you need. Your international passport is a constant. You try to raise money for it. You try to set money apart for it. In these days of social media, you can even find a social media content creator that will be funding somebody's passport, you know, just for free or just for supporting the person or just for being willing to do something productive. The other thing you need is your transcript. when I was preparing for this conversation, I looked up the process of getting transcripts in Cameroon. And I don't know how true the Google search results were, but I understand that it may not be something you receive on the very same day of your graduation. But if you're able to get your transcript as quickly as possible, please do get your transcript. Now, you don't even need to wait to graduate before you start applying for some of these scholarships. When you are at the end of the first semester of your final year, you can already begin to apply for scholarships. They call it applications with awaiting results. So you don't have your results yet, but you are in the process of trying to apply for scholarships. And what you will need at that point is your transcript. And that's why I've placed transcript just before certificates, because very many people will pay attention to the certificates, not knowing that the transcript is even more important when you are looking for scholarships in many cases. So you need your transcript. And if you are looking for a master's degree scholarship, you can start applying for that scholarship at the end or somewhere in your final year before your graduation, because some of them will tie into the point where you have graduated, and then you can just move over and start your studies. So, of course, you need your certificate. And apart from your certificate, the language test now. So, but when you come to this language test, first, my advice is explore all the options for getting a waiver. A waiver means that the school says you require a language test, but you can try to persuade the school to, exempt you from presenting a language test. And the things you can use could either be an alternative type of test. Generally, people will look at the IELTS English language exam, and then TOEFL, that's test of English as a foreign language exam. TOEFL is more from the US, and then IELTS is from the UK. But then they are accepted globally. But there are some other options that are cheaper. You can look at what is called Duolingo. The Duolingo English test is relatively more cheap. It's not even relatively, it's significantly cheaper than these other options. And this is something you can, consider. This is something you can look into and try to get it. But consider all the options for exemption first. How do you get an exemption from the English test of English language? First is get a letter from your school that confirms that your education was conducted in English language. That's your bachelor's degree education or your master's degree education, depending on the level of education you are now going for. So if you can get that letter, I think the letter would usually come from maybe the registrar, but some authority from your school should give you that letter that says that all the studies you conducted were in English, and then even your exams were conducted in English language. Once you're able to get that kind of document, you can present it to the school. On the basis of that, the school can give you a waiver. The other thing you can present to a school in order to get a waiver is your publication, evidence of paper publications or journal paper publications and conference presentations. And very often when I talk to young students about this, everybody is like, well, it's a lot of work. We can't do this. We can't meet up with this. But sometimes people accept that they will do it, but you find out that eventually they don't do anything. Now, if you decide to write a journal publication, this is how you make it easy for yourself. I believe that most of you come from the same kind of school or from the same kind of background, so maybe sciences. You can pick like 3 persons who have a similar research interest from your team, pair yourselves in 3s or in 4s, and then join yourselves together with one of your lecturers who will be the main supervisor of that research project. And then one person does introduction, the other person does literature review, the other person does, what's it called again, methodology, the other person does results and analysis. You pool your resources together, and then you simplify the process of writing a paper. When you do that, you will be surprised that within a very short period, you may have up to 2 papers from that group that's published in journals. And you don't need to go for the topmost journals in the world. You may not get an acceptance through them very easily, but there are lots of journals that, they are not like the top end journals, the 1% of journals up there. You can find those kind of journals and then put in your papers there, and your papers could very easily be accepted. And once you have that publication, it shows 2 things. You can use it as evidence of your English language text as a replacement. We'll talk more on publications just in a few minutes, but let's stop at this for now and then look at the other requirements. You need an academic CV for most scholarship applications. Now, when I say academic CV, a CV is always a CV, but there are some differences between an academic CV and a work CV. So an academic CV will try to highlight your academic strengths and then your potential for research. A job CV will try to highlight your work experience and your potential to contribute more, to deliver more results on the job, right? So when you write your academic CV, there's actually a video on my YouTube channel where I talked about these kind of CVs, the academic and the non-academic CV. You can look into that much later. And there are lots of other videos by other content creators on YouTube that talk about academic CVs. You can also look that up, but you will always need a CV that tells a good story of yourself. Then students will begin to ask, but I'm just a student, I have not worked. That's why you need to start building skills. That's why you need to start doing some of the other things I'm going to show us just shortly. You can build your skills, and then you can also reflect on the courses you've done. And then, of course, if you have written any journal paper publication, that journal publication goes into your CV, and this is how you are beginning to boost up your CV. You can also do community volunteering and all manner of short jobs that you do in between. All of these can go into your CV to boost it up. The other thing you need is your SOP. SOP is short form for statement of purpose. This is an essay, basically. You will also, it could be an SOP, it could be a letter of motivation, depending on how you call it. But you're going to need to write an essay definitely for most scholarship applications, either to the school or to the institution, the organization that's awarding the scholarship. A research proposal is if you are going for more research-oriented courses like your PhD or master's degree by research, because in the real sense, abroad, there are two categories of master's degree. It could be a master's by research, a master's degree course-based. That's the one you go to class and then write exams and all that and all that. Now, what are the steps you want to take if you are going to get an international scholarship? I want to simplify this for us as quickly as possible. Now, the first thing you want to do is you need to build up good grades. Good grades. Remember, in the build up or in the first introductory parts of this conversation, I mentioned that a first class is not compulsory to win scholarships. However, if you have a first class, you simplify the process towards winning a scholarship for yourself. I don't know if that's making some sense, but if you have a first class, you make the process easier for yourself. It's not a compulsory requirement, but if you have it, you make the process easier for yourself. Now, imagine that you are not a first class candidate, or you're somebody who, based on the level where you are now, you can't make a first class. Remember that you still need a good grade, because somebody who has failed in his bachelor's cannot expect to win a scholarship for his master's, because, or for her master's, because scholarships are very often more or less excellence based or merit based kind of scholarships. You can't expect to win that. So that's why you need to do the best you can to build up a good CGPA. If you're in your first year, your second year, your third year, your fourth year, anywhere you are, try as much as possible to make the best of use of your time. You know, people will tell you that education is a scam, education doesn't matter, this and that and that and that. But I don't know anybody who has good grades with the right kind of information and the right attitude to, chasing his dreams, that's, poorer than the person who that's suffering or not able to seize one opportunity or the other. And when I say this, I talk from the experience of my friends. I have friends who have got first class, second class, upper. And if I think back, most of them are either doing well on the job, or most of them, or some have gone into, further studies, and mostly under scholarships. So it will always pay back. The other thing you want to do is develop some research skills. And this is very important for the graduate assistantship kind of scholarship, because most graduate assistantships will come in the form of graduate research assistant. And this is how it works. A professor goes out there to secure some funding for a particular project from a company or from the government to research something and to present, provide solutions to something. And then that professor goes back to hire students who will actually conduct that research. So by the time you begin to develop your research skills, you will know that you are standing a very good chance with those professors, because they are looking for somebody who can deliver on a research program. And because you have shown evidence of possessing some research skills, you will be a top contender for those kind of scholarships. And these are the ways you balance up your, if your grades are not so good, these are some of the ways you can balance them up. The other thing is you need to volunteer and learn to contribute to your community. You see, what Michael has done today is something that can go very easily into Michael's CV and into his essay if he is applying for some kind of scholarships. And I'll give you examples. If you're applying for a scholarship like MasterCard Foundation Scholarship or the Chevening Scholarship, you will find that sometimes they're looking for somebody who has demonstrated evidence of good leadership. And sometimes they're looking for somebody who is able to build networks. And in the recent, I've never met Michael. In fact, we've never spoken on the phone. The best we've come at is having a couple of chat exchanges on WhatsApp, and being able to organize, think through this kind of event, organize it, convince myself to take out time from my other activities to host this is an evidence of somebody who can build a good network, who can network to achieve something good. And then being able to organize the rest of the students is evidence of somebody who is able to like lead people on a good path. And this is something that scholarships like Chevening is looking for. So he's contributing to his community of students, and then he is also volunteering his time and building a network at the same time. Now it depends on how well he's able to tell the story, and that's why in the next couple of slides, I'll tell us why it's important that you learn how to write, because you need to be able to highlight your strengths to the person who is either going to employ you as a worker or somebody who is going to give you a scholarship. Then the other thing is, after you've done all of these things, and volunteering and contributing to your community can be in different forms. It could be in the form of organizing tutorials. It could be in the form of maybe if you belong to one fellowship or the other, you can decide to organize tutorials for the younger student members of this fellowship, or for make it open to everybody. You can decide to do like host an online event where you teach people how to gain, share insights and the things you know. Or you can organize a cleanup exercise for your community or for your institution. You can maybe try to do a fundraising kind of program to be able to buy like waste bins for your faculty. These are things that can go into your essay as your contribution to your community, and these kind of things will stand out and will always boost your scholarship application in some kind of scholarships, especially those which are not from the universities. Now, you need to gather your documents and you need to apply. There are people who will end up saying, well, we have attended this event today, but they will never go to work on the documents that are required. They will never go to apply for any scholarship. They will never search for any scholarship on the internet. You just would have successfully wasted your time, except of course if you're attending on behalf of your relatives to pass the information across to them. But otherwise, what is the point of attending an event like this if you will not apply for any scholarship? Now, when you start applying for scholarship, for many people it comes as a shock, but you will get lots of rejections sometimes, or some rejections sometimes. But even when you get the rejections, do not refuse to apply more, or do not fail to apply more because you've gotten a rejection. The reason they don't want to stop is because the more you apply, the more experience you gain, and then you also don't want to repeat the same kind of application with the same quality of document. You want to improve on every particular application. Now, you need to build up your presentation skills, right? Because for many scholarships, you will either go through an interview process, or you will go through a competition that will involve you that will make you present to an audience. If you don't have good presentation skills, and this is something most people do not have, it's not just you. If you don't have it, don't feel shy. Many people in the world do not have good presentation skills. Now, if you even look at the slides I'm sharing with us today, you see that these slides are relatively clean. This is not like the greatest of slides, but it starts from making this kind of slides. Your slides must not always be bullet points. You can think out of the box and try to create something that's a bit of clean. And you see the amount of information I'm communicating with these few information that you can see on the slides. So your slides should be like a guiding document. And again, I'm not reading the slides to you. This is presentation skills, and there are lots of other information about presentation skills. If you follow us on Facebook and on YouTube, you can always get this kind of information. Academy of Scholarships and Transitions is the name. Also on TikTok, you can find us at ASAT. You can get more information into all these kind of things there. But you need to build up your presentation skill, because you need to be able to communicate your ideas and convince people to give you scholarships. They're going to be paying a lot of money for you. You need to convince them to give you that money. Then interview skills, I've discussed that just now. You can practice to interview amongst yourselves. You can ask yourself questions and then hear the other person and then make improvements on what the person has said, especially when you are planning for a particular scholarship. Now let's continue. If you must win a scholarship abroad, you need to learn that this is very competitive. It's not, nobody's going to give you a scholarship on a platter of gold. Nobody is going to say, well, I have some extra money there, just come take it and go to school. You're going to pass through a competition. And because it's going to be competitive, that's why you need to improve your writing skills. Right? A lot of people have experience. Their problem is they don't know how to communicate their experience to somebody else, for somebody else to believe that they actually have these experiences. And when I talk about writing skills, there are always two guidelines I teach people when it comes to writing. The first one is what is called the STAR approach to writing. And then the second one is the 5W principles. You know, the alphabet W. There are 5 words starting with the letter W that can build. If you think about your writing in that framework, you'll be able to develop your writing to a very magnificent extent. Now, the STAR approach means that when you write an essay, for instance, you think of a situation and you think of a task, you think of an action, you think of results. You think of the situation you met, you think of the task you set before yourself or the task that was set before you by the leadership that appointed you into that position, and then you think of the actions you took or the actions you intend to take and the results you got or the intended results that you will get. If you think of any scholarship essay within this framework, you will always get a perfect essay. Now, the 5W principle is you want to think of your essay writing, and this is even more directly related to your CV, but your essays as well. If you think of who, you think of what, you think of when, you think of where, and you think of why, you'll be able to get your essays and your CVs to a perfect state. I discussed this particular principle in very details on a particular video on my YouTube channel, but because of time, we may not be able to go into the details of how this is applied. However, you need to improve your writing skills. There are other models for writing that you may find on the internet, but these two I've shared with you now are the ones that have helped me. So the STAR approach, STAR, STAR, representing situation, task, action, and results. And then the 5W principles representing who, when, where, what, and why. If you follow these principles, you'll be able to get a very good essay for yourself. You'll be able to get a very good CV for yourself. So when you write your CV, you are thinking of who did the job that is you. You are thinking of what did you do in terms of quantifying the actions you took or the job you did and the things you have done. And then you are thinking of where, in what particular situation or place did you do that thing you did? Why did you do it? All the skills that you had that made that job possible for you. These are the things you want to just highlight. Now, the other thing is, when you start applying for scholarships, you need to identify a scholarship. Remember, we mentioned planning. So the skills that are relevant for graduate assistantships are not exactly the same skills that are relevant for Chevening scholarship application, for instance. For Chevening, you will need some evidence of leadership, some evidence of networking. For most graduate assistantships, they are not really looking for your evidence of work or your evidence of leadership. They are looking more for your evidence of research. Can this person do research if we bring this person into this particular group? Those are the kind of things they're looking for more there, right? So you look at those you identify those categories of scholarships, build the skills and the experiences that are relevant to those ones. If you are going to apply for Chevening scholarship, this is the time you want to start building your leadership skills and building your networking skills. And it's very easy, especially in this modern world of social media. Then pay close attention to the details of every application you make. This might sound very common, but you realize that most people who apply for scholarship do not apply with the relevant documents. They do not follow instructions. In fact, there was this professor in Canada who made a post about a scholarship opportunity under her. And she said that 50% of the people who applied for that particular position did not follow the instructions. 50%. So if 100 people had applied, 50 of those 100 did not follow instructions. The person might be intelligent, the person might be smart, the person might have a first class, have anything, but if that person does not follow the instruction, the person would have kicked himself or herself out. And that is why, a first class is good for scholarships, but that's not the only thing you need for scholarships. And if you are one of those people who feel afraid of applying for a scholarship because you don't have a first class, just know that some of the first class holders might be applying without following instructions. And then if you follow the instructions, even with your second class, you may stand and beat those people to winning that scholarship, especially if you have the relevant skills. The other thing you need to do is learn to talk to the alumni of the scholarship you are applying for. The alumni. If you talk to me about the scholarship I have won myself, I will very much easily provide you with the insight that will help you to win. If you talk to somebody else who has won another scholarship, they'll give you insight. And it's easy to do. And that's why I want to come to this point. I teach this particular slide when I talk about networking, but there's a reason I'm bringing it in here today, because when you think of winning scholarships, you should also learn that the journey to a scholarship can be made easier if you build the right network. So if you build the right network, by this I mean that if you know the people, the alumni of that scholarship, they can tell you inside stories about the scholarship that will help you to win it. If you know the professors who manage those scholarships, they can give you ideas that will help you win. And even if they don't share ideas that will help you win, you will always know when they make their advertisements open. So when a scholarship becomes open under a particular professor, that professor will most cases go to social media, especially on LinkedIn or Twitter, to write about it. And when the person goes to write about it, because you are connected with that person, you are able to take advantage of that particular opportunity, and you are able to pull that, submit your application as the first person in the front row of the application. And that makes you stand out. This is the role of social media. I'm just trying to see that I'm not overshooting our time. Then all of these that you see here is something that you can do for yourself. You optimize your social media profiles. Particularly, I insist on LinkedIn, because when you use LinkedIn, that's this one you are seeing here. If you use LinkedIn, you'll be able to get very good access to professors, to alumni, to doctors, to scholarship holders, and all that. So when you go to that LinkedIn, just look for, if you're applying for Chevening Scholarship, for instance, just type Chevening Scholar on the search bar. And once you go from that search bar, you can then streamline to Chevening Scholars from Cameroon, Chevening Scholars from this country, from Africa, and all that. And then you can begin to find the persons you will engage with and those who will provide you information. Now, the other good thing is, if you are connecting with professors, for instance, you can go on to read a couple of papers from those supervisors. There is a way you manage these conversations with your seniors. They are not your mates, of course, they are your seniors. And there's a way you manage those conversations. This is something I've talked about a lot on social media, on Facebook, on YouTube. You can find the details of those videos there. But you're able to manage your conversations with them, and you're able to position yourself strategically in their front, where at every given point they think of the need for a student to work with, they can remember you. And you achieve this through what I call the push and pull strategy. You are reaching out to them, and then you are creating the kind of content on your social media pages that will show them how serious a human being you are, what you can offer them, and what they will gain if they employ you into their team, what you bring to the table, your passion, and all of those kind of things. You can achieve all of these. What you see here, this slide that you're seeing now, is a slide that teaches you how to make the best use of your social media time. You don't spend it watching comedians. You don't spend it watching the latest music, dragging the latest, engaging in the latest dragging of one celebrity or the other. All of these things are frivolous, more or less. They're not going to add much value to you as a person. But if you become strategic about your use of social media, you see scholarship opportunities. Like every day, not just every day, almost every time I log into my LinkedIn account, I see scholarship opportunities. I don't, it will be difficult to come across a day when I go to LinkedIn and I don't find a scholarship opportunity, because I've strategically built a network that makes me see those scholarships. And then I have also strategically positioned myself in such a way that if there's a scholarship circulating around, I will see it. The same thing applies to jobs in my field. The same thing applies to any other thing I choose to now focus on. If I want to focus on a particular area, I will always do those kind of things. So LinkedIn is one, Twitter is another one, Facebook is another one, because there are lots of people who create content around scholarships on Facebook. There are lots of people who create content around scholarships on YouTube. You can find all these channels and follow them. Now, what are the useful sites that you can follow? Some of these sites, I don't run them. One is opportunities.com, but I know that there are lots of opportunities they share there. I think the owner is a Nigerian, and so she talks more about opportunities within Africa. Jobs.ac.uk is a website where you find most of the scholarship opportunities, graduate assistantship opportunities in the UK. Although in the UK they are called studentships, but it's the same equivalent of graduate assistantships that you have in the US. You can go there, you will find all these opportunities. Now, World Bank also has some kind of scholarships that they fund sometimes. And, the other thing is just do a Google search or use one of these AI tools. You can go to ChatGPT and ask it for scholarship, for a list of scholarships in your specific field, and it will give it to you. Or you can ask Google, or you can ask Google Gemini, you can ask Copilot, any of them. All these AI tools will be able to give you scholarship opportunities, and Google search as well will be able to give you scholarship opportunities. Now, if you are looking for scholarships in, say, Norway, not so many people are talking about Norway, but it's a great place to be. Not so many people are talking about Austria, but it's a great place to go to. The same thing applies to Finland, applies to other places like maybe Latvia, Lithuania, and all of these places. You can just go to Google and then type study in, name a particular country. Very often it will take you to a website that says study in so and so country, maybe like in Hungary, in the UK, or any place. It will take you to a website that's named study in this country whatever. And on that website, you'll be able to see the scholarship opportunities, the cost of living, the student experiences, and a whole lot of information you will find there. And the scholarships that are specific to that country will also be there. Finland has one, Hungary has one, Norway has one. Most of these countries, we have their own study in, whatever country it is. Then let's also, before we move on to the last slide and then take our questions, there's something I want to also highlight. You see, if you follow the instructions, if you follow the things I've talked about today, you remember how I laid emphasis on your research assistantship opportunity, or your research skills. Remember how I laid emphasis on you trying to write up a paper, trying to write up something that's, a good research paper. If you follow all of these things, I just want to let you know that there are some scholarships you can apply for you can apply for some PhD scholarships directly from your undergraduate studies. Mark this statement because it's very important. So when you go to the website of jobs.ac.uk, most of the scholarships you will see they are titled PhD scholarships. But there are lots of scholarships that if you have good grades, you have the right kind of research experience and the right kind of research skills, they will let you apply for PhDs directly from your bachelor's. I know people who have won this in the United States, and I know it's possible within the UK and many other developed countries as well. It gives you the opportunity to bypass a master's degree and go direct to a PhD. Data analysis will always be a good skill to learn. Simulation will always be a good skill to learn for any science students. And then programming, coding will always be a good skill to learn for any science student. These are skills that will position you for direct scholarships into institutions. You can also think of learning some specific softwares that are relevant to your particular field, ANSYS. You can think of COMSOL, you can think of Aspen, HiSys, all of these kind of softwares. You identify the one that's relevant to your field, try to learn it as much as possible. It will help you both for finding jobs and for finding scholarships. Develop your writing skill. every scholarship, every professor will value your writing skill very greatly. If you can write papers, you can write, conduct research, many people will value it. Now, at the end of all the things we've said today, I want to remind us of something. If you don't take this information and transform them into action, you would have wasted your time today. And like Woody Allen says, 80% of success is in showing up. Showing up in this case will mean that you show up through your application, show up by applying, and show up by improving your applications. Don't show up the same way you showed up yesterday, tomorrow. If you showed up in a particular way yesterday and it didn't work, then change that process, modify it, improve on it, and then show up tomorrow without giving up. So go from learning to actions. If you keep learning and keep consuming information without applying them, you may not be making much difference. And remember, this is a quote I mention to people most times. This world is too distracted to remember the professional or the student who fails to show up. If you don't show up, if you don't let the world know that you can do something or that you qualify for something, or show them why they should give you an opportunity, nobody is going to come to your father's house and knock on the door of your dad's house and say, come out here, I want to give you a scholarship. You need to apply for the scholarships. You need to be the one that's chasing the scholarship opportunities. Show up. And as you show up, I am a Christian. I believe very much in what the Bible teaches. And the Bible teaches that we should ask and we will receive. The Bible teaches that if we seek, we shall find. The Bible teaches that if we knock on doors, the doors will be open to us. There are doors you will knock on today and they will open. There are doors you don't need to knock on because your dad has knocked on that door for you and the door was open. You just need to come walk through it. But there are doors that you need to knock on again, again, and again, and again, and again. But the promise is that if you are doing what you need to do as somebody who follows God, if you're obeying God, keeping the commandments of God, you knock on doors, the doors will open to you. What the Bible doesn't promise is that you knock once and the door will open. So you might not knock on the door of scholarship once and it opens. The scholarship that's funding my PhD, I had to apply for it twice. The first attempt, I didn't get it. Somebody else got it who merited it better than myself, I must say. But in this second attempt, on the second attempt, I got it. So that was me knocking a second time. You need to learn to knock. And by knocking, you are showing up. Somebody once told me, a very high profile professional in the UK once told me that if you need anything, just ask for it. If you need help with scholarship applications, ask for it. If you need help with your growth as a professional, ask for it. If you need mentorship, ask for it. If you need anything, just ask for it. And you will be surprised that somebody will give you a yes as an answer. And sometimes even when they give you a no as an answer, they give you a pointer in the direction where you should go and seek for answers. It happened to me recently, and I saved myself about £96 that I would have paid to register for a conference. By asking and talking to the right people, I got that conference ticket for free. You just need to ask, and you need to also remember that it's not of him that willeth, it's not of him that runneth, it's of God that showeth mercy. And that's why you need to pay attention to God, the things God is saying, the things God is teaching, and the things God is trying to convince you to do. You need to pay attention to it because there are some times when you put all the energy into work, do all the things you can do, and you are just seeing very little result. But with God, all things are possible and your life processes become a lot easier. Now, that was me. And this was done on behalf of Academy of Scholarships and Transitions. You can follow us on YouTube. The name is Academy of Scholarships and Transitions. On Facebook, you can also follow us. The name is Academy of Scholarships and Transitions. Now I am open to your questions and I will try to answer them if those questions come up. I will stop sharing my screen now so that I can focus more on you guys. You're welcome. Yeah, I can. I'm hearing you. I'm with you very completely. I can hear you. Oh, oh, okay. So the thing is, it will depend on the program you are applying for. Now, there are some programs that will have, like, how do I explain it? I hope I got your question correctly. But if you are applying for, let's say, a scholarship like Fulbright can fund your scholarship to the US, right? Fund your studies in the US. But something like Chevnin is another scholarship organization that will fund your studies in the UK. There is also Commonwealth, and in fact, Commonwealth is broken into different categories. There is Commonwealth scholarship, where you can be nominated by some institutions in your country, like your scholarship board, some non-governmental organizations. There's also what's called Commonwealth Shared Scholarship. These ones are still within the UK. And then there is another one that is called, I think, Queen Elizabeth Commonwealth Scholarship. These are all Commonwealth scholarships and they fund your education within the UK. But there are sometimes when somebody wants to take like a professional course that's not really a master's or a PhD, maybe you want to do like, let's say, project management professional certification, right? You may not get a school or a standard funding body that's going to do it, but if you look for some philanthropist within your country or outside of your country, you may find a philanthropist that's funding it. In Nigeria, for instance, I know there is a particular man on LinkedIn, Ndubisi Ekekwe. I know that he runs like a business, have philanthropists come to his business school and pay for people. So the person come and say, "Well, I'm paying for 5 people to take your mini MBA course." Those are like specific professional courses that people pay for. But generally, if you are looking for scholarships that will fund your masters and fund your PhD, looking more within the sphere of what we discussed today in terms of the graduate assistantship opportunities, or you're looking at all these other non-governmental scholarships, there are just so many there. You can type scholarship opportunities for this particular program, right? Or scholarship opportunities for this particular program in a named country. If you search that way, you'll be able to get some results from Google. Okay, you're welcome. Okay, so graduate assistantship, basically what it means is that if you, like in your school, for instance, you have a professor or you have one lecturer who is a doctor, and abroad, what they do is that they write something that's called a research proposal and send out to institutions. maybe like to companies. Let's use oil and gas companies. I know in Cameroon there are oil and gas companies. At least I know that. I think Luke Oil operates in Cameroon. So let's use oil and gas companies for instance. So let's say that Luke Oil has a problem. They have a challenge with their oil production, and they are looking for a solution to that challenge. So that lecturer or professor writes a proposal to them to say, well, we can research into this problem you have and find you a solution to your problem. So Luke Oil says, well, if you're able to do that, we are willing to give you, let's say, $2,000 or let's say $2 million, depending on the magnitude of the problem, to find a solution to this problem for us. So Lukoil goes, well, yes, that's good. And then they send that money to that professor or to that lecturer. Ideally, they will send the money to the school where the person is working. Now, that lecturer will go out to hire students because he himself, he has got his lecturing job, he's doing so many other things, so he can't concentrate and finish the big research by himself. So he will go out to look for students, and then he will put up an advert that says, okay, I'm looking for students with a background in chemistry who understand, let's say, organic chemistry because oil is hydrocarbon, and who understands, let's say, fractional distillation, for instance. They will specify all those details. And then you look at it and you know that you fit into this category that the person has described. So you apply for the scholarship. To do this, there is something they call, so when you get it, your tuition will be covered from that money that Luke Oil has given. And then the lecturer will also pay you money. It's like employment. But in addition to the employment, you'll be getting either a master's degree or a PhD, depending on the nature of the arrangement, for free. So they will be paying you some money to cover your living expenses. Sometimes they may go as far as paying for your visa and travel costs. Some others wouldn't pay for your visa costs and all that. You have to sort that out by yourself. It depends. But some will cover it. Other scholarships like Chevron will cover everything from your travel to your visa to your living expenses, your tuition, and all of that. But you get this graduate assistantship, and then you go to the country, you focus on that research, and your research topic will be within that field that the person has described. Now, there is something also that I need to mention to us. When you start thinking of studying abroad, you don't limit yourself to the scope of what you have studied at the moment. Like you are studying chemistry, for instance, your scholarship options are not just in chemistry. You can have scholarships even in the faculty of engineering, for instance. You can have scholarships in faculty of environmental studies, because what happens is that um, scholarships and research is applied. So somebody has an engineering problem that needs the knowledge of a chemist to be able to solve that problem, or the knowledge of somebody from physics or somebody from maths background, all of those kind of things. So you become open-minded of opportunities that could come from all the other fields that are related or needing aspects of your field. Yeah, then that's just it. I don't know if that answered the full question, but I think that's the basic scope of the knowledge of graduate assistantships. You're welcome. Um, yeah, so yeah, somebody has asked a question about age limits. Yeah, it's yeah. So age limits are specific to some scholarships. Some scholarships will have their age limits. Some others wouldn't have. Yeah. So there are some scholarships that will have age limits, right? For instance, if you think of MasterCard Foundation Scholarship at a bachelor's level, I think their age limit is about 29 years or so. But if you begin to go higher, the age limit begins to move upwards a little bit. But for graduate assistantship, most of the graduate assistantships I know of do not have any age limits at all. So you can apply for graduate assistantship even if if you are like 35 years. If I know somebody who is doing a graduate assistantship in my school, and I don't think he's less than 40, but he's doing PhD. Yeah, but that's just the way it works. Back to you, Michael. welcome. Okay, so the language difference thing is not really, it's not as much a problem as people see it. And this is even what happens. I'll give an example from myself. I studied in Russia. I did bachelor's and a master's in Russia. I know I have a couple of friends from Cameroon who were also in Russia at the time. There was one Henry, there was one Matthias. I think they are both from maybe the southern part of Cameroon, I don't know. But both of them are from Cameroon. There was one other guy, I can't remember his name now, but he was my senior. So, and this was Russia. We had to study in the Russian language and all. So what they did was they gave us an intensive class of Russian language, before we started our main studies. We spent like 6 to 8 months learning the Russian language before we now started learning our engineering and all that. But there are many schools in these non-English speaking countries that will teach you in English. If you go to China, in fact, I have a friend who finished from China. He came back, I think, late 2021, and he works for Huawei, this Chinese phone maker, the tech company from China. He studied all his PhD in China in English. I know I can count like maybe I know another man who went to China, studied in English. I know a friend who studied medicine in China in English. So there are lots of English speaking schools in China. If you are planning to go to a non-English speaking country, even if it's Germany, if it is France, if it is Denmark, if it is Netherlands, and you want to study in English, first start from the schools that will teach your course in English language. So you can look for, schools that teach, let's say, electrical engineering in English in China. It will give you a list of them, and then you can begin from there. But if your scholarship is to a country or a school that has to teach you in the language of that country, very often they will provide a language course for you first. It can be challenging, but if you focus on it, you'll be able to learn it. I learned Russian language, my friends learned it, and you know, it's considered tough, but it's doable. You will learn it, and then you make very good progress with your studies. You're welcome. Let me get you question correctly. That's the certification means like the one you go to the Ministry of Education to do, or some other. What kind of certification is that? More like to authenticate that the certificate is original. Okay, yeah, yeah. There are some countries that will require it. If you are especially most of these non-English speaking countries, if you are going to Russia for studies, there's something they call they used to call it in their language, they call it equivalent not something like that. So you have to go to the Ministry of Education in your country to just certify that this document you are bringing to them is original. Some would say you go to the embassy of the country to certify it. But if you are going to, let's say, the United States, for instance, they might ask you to do what is called a WES equivalent of your certificate. So WES is World Education Services. I know that the United States and Canada, they value it, right? But sometimes it's good as well because lots of people talk about how they did West evaluation and then their CGPA increased because sometimes I think West, what they do is that they eliminate the courses that somebody failed and then do the CGPA based on the courses that someone has failed a course in one semester, repeated it and passed it, they will use just the one he passed to calculate his CGPA, something of that kind. So there are some of these things, but they are country specific. I know that if you are coming to the UK, for instance, you don't need any of those. They don't require any of those verifications from you. Again, it depends on the country you are coming from. So some places might require certification from Cameroon. I may not require certification from Kenya, or authentication rather, if we use the right word. They might require you to do it, but might not require it from other countries. It's just, it can vary depending. Yeah, but if the country says you should do it, then you don't have a choice than to do it. You're welcome. Okay, that's a very important question. And actually, when you write an academic CV, what you have to do is how do I summarize it to make it very simple? So when you write an academic CV, you want to focus on your academic strengths, your research experience, and your research potentials. And you should start reflecting, this should be reflected on your CV right from the beginning. So conventionally, when you write your CV, you have the contact details. So you write all those contact details, your name, your email address, your phone number. Then the next thing you do is to write like a summary, a career summary or a professional summary or whatever summary that you title it. But it should be a summary of yourself. So in that summary, somebody who's looking for a job will normally talk more about his work experience and the next work he's planning to apply for and the skills he has that are relevant to that work. Somebody who is applying for a scholarship will talk more about his if he has some research experience, his research experience. The person will also talk about the passion he has for the next phase of research. So you are writing, instead of talking about the job, you are talking about the school and the education, right? Now, when you finish from there, an ideal job CV will go to work experience. In my case, depending on how advanced you are on your academic journey, you can go straight to maybe like research experience or teaching experience, depending on which of them you have the most. And when you even say teaching experience, all the tutorials you've been organizing, this is where that writing thing I was talking about comes in again. You need to be able to document the things you are doing. If you are a tutorial teacher, that could go into teaching experience if you're applying for a graduate assistantship position or even an academic position. Then you need to also highlight the like when you write your project, your graduation project, for instance, will have a topic, it will have key findings. You need to include that graduate your graduation project or thesis, whatever it's called in your place, in your CV and the key highlights of what you have been able to achieve. This is, of course, if you're just coming out fresh from school without much research experience. Then, of course, you're going to have your work experience in terms of your IT if you have done your IT there. But the key difference is in the information you are communicating. You might have the same kind of sections, but the way you are communicating the information is what really makes the difference. You are trying to position yourself as somebody who can do research and who can study, who has got the right attitude to academics. In the job CV, you are positioning yourself as somebody who has got the right attitude to work and who has evidence that you have been working before. Because work may not require so much research, except it's a research-oriented work. But academics will require research, especially if you are going for graduate assistantships. Now, this is not to say that an academic CV should not have your work experience, but if I'm writing an academic CV, I will try to talk more to those academic parts, the research experience. I will need to highlight them ahead of my work experience, and then the work experience can follow it. Because again, there are some scholarships that will require, that will give preference to somebody who has been in the industry before. So, and for me, the way I approach CV writing is I look at it from the description of the job or description of the scholarship as obtained or as contained in the advert. Because when you look at the advertisement, it gives you an idea of what they are looking for, what kind of strengths and what kind of skills and what kind of experience do they want to see on your CV. So I look at the job profile or the scholarship profile, and then it gives me a better idea. So all the things I'm saying now are just like a framework, but to be able to get the right quality of a CV, you need to write that CV based on the job description or based on the scholarship description. You have to look at it, and it gives you an insight into what they are looking for. Are they looking for future leaders? Then highlight your leadership skills. It's still an academic CV, but that's what they want in that academic CV. Are they looking for somebody who has good research experience? Highlight your research experience and your research skills on that CV. It could vary. So it's sort of dynamic, if I would use that word dynamic. But you need to just have a look at what does the job say. That's the starting point for writing any good CV. What does the job say? And remember that your CV is not static. You don't use one CV to apply for everything. So even if you have an academic CV that's tailored to one particular scholarship, you don't just pick it and then spread it across all other scholarship applications. You need to bring in the uniqueness of each of those applications and the uniqueness of the requirements into the CV. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. So the thing is this: when you apply for a scholarship, your internship can be considered as a work experience. Because when you do internship, ideally, you are supposed to be working on something. Maybe depends on how good the company where you had your internship is. If you do internship in a hospital, for instance, you could be doing like maybe working on a particular equipment where you are testing blood, you are testing this or conducting this other test. So all of those things you do can go into your CV as work experience. Again, if you are working in a lab or a research lab, you might be doing the same thing, like taking blood samples, testing them, but from a more research oriented point of view. And then that could be a research experience depending. But what you have done during your internship can go into your research experience, it can go into your work experience, depending on which one is more relevant to. And if you are a student leader, your student leadership can be a work experience as well. So you write it like you the way you present it now depends on the nature of the scholarship. If you are going for Chevening scholarship, they will require an entire essay that should make you discuss your leadership experience. So in that essay, that's where you want to highlight your leadership experience in the student union. It's very acceptable. In fact, even your leadership experience in the church or in any religious organization is acceptable as well. Your leadership within student bodies is acceptable, community leaderships are acceptable, all of those kind of leadership. But the key point is this: if you know that what you are doing now can be useful to your future, then you start paying good attention to record keeping as you do those things. Right? For instance, when I was in secondary school, we did myself and four other people. I was much younger then. We did like there was a policy within our school that we wanted to challenge on behalf of the students. And in fact, the seniors in our school at the point would not join us to do that, but we're able to secure audience with the leadership of the school, had a debate with the school and all that. We're able to get some kind of compromise with the school on behalf of all the students. At that point, I did not know how relevant what we were doing was. I did not know the value or the magnitude of the impact we were creating at the time. We were just four of us, four boys. Now, if I am doing that now, I'll be more focused. In fact, the notes we wrote that time, I think we lost that note somewhere because we really didn't know the value of what we are doing. But if you know the value of what you are doing, whether as a student, then or as a graduate, you pay attention to keeping records of those things in such a way that you can present it in the CV with data and with proof. So I led 50 students, or I led maybe like 4 students to represent a student body of, let's say, 500 students to address this particular challenge. This was what we did, this was the result, and all that. So you now know how a CV should look like, what an essay should look like, and you know the key metrics you should be picking. So you are picking this, you are recording this, you are recording that, and that is how you guide yourself, in the process of executing those things. It makes one a more responsible leader as well, if I would say. So you become a more responsible leader and all of that kind of thing. Now, everybody must not lead in the student union, but you can lead in different ways. Remember, I mentioned maybe organizing tutorials. Somebody might do it, just as a philanthropy, but another person could be doing it more purposefully. That I'm doing this philanthropy because I know this will help me in the future. There are people who, for instance, their parents are in politics and they could very easily raise money to fix some situations within the community of the university, but they may not do it because they don't understand the value of it. But if the person understands that value, the person can very much easily, speak to friends of his parents, do a fundraising using the influence of his parents. They can raise funds and change the situation of a particular school, even as a young person, and it goes into that profile or portfolio of the person. But most people might not do that because they don't know the value of of the opportunities they have and the contributions they can make. So this is just more like how to say that you how relevant or how useful the leadership and the work and the contributions to society become depends on how much of attention the person pays to the details of what he's doing and how much of records the person keeps of what he's doing and how the person now narrates that story either on the CV or in an essay. Yeah, I don't know if there are any other questions. Maybe we can take one or two more and then maybe we'll call it a day if there are any. Are there any other questions? If we have some, then let's bring them up. We've shot over our time by 30 minutes. I'm willing to give like 5 more minutes to see that we get every questions answered and nobody goes back with a question that came on board. Any other questions, please? Let's go ahead. Was that the chat? If you have a question, please just unmute and go ahead. Okay, please go ahead. You're welcome. Yeah. Yeah, so this will now be specific to individual scholarships. You remember there was one of the slides where I mentioned that we should develop experience that are specific to the scholarships we intend to apply for. Now, this is what I meant by that statement. If I want to, there's the scholarship that's funding my study, for instance, values memberships of professional bodies. So if anybody is applying for that scholarship without relevant membership of professional bodies, the person stands a chance of losing it. So if you belong to, let's say, if you are a chemical engineer and then you belong to maybe the Association of Chemical Engineers in Cameroon, or Association of Global Association of Chemical Engineers, or Society of Petroleum Engineers, anything of that kind, they value it. Then there are scholarships, for instance, where, like, classical example will be chevening, because chevening is based more on about five things. There's the component of your academic merits there. There is a component of your performance in an interview there. There's a component of your leadership experience or leadership potential, I would say, because sometimes a leadership essay could be written from the position of what's your previous leadership experience or your plans for future leadership. So somebody who understands the problem of a society or the problems of a country and can articulate in clear terms how he intends to or she intends to lead that society out of that problem can also be considered as somebody who has a good leadership potential. So good leadership potential is one. Then the other thing is good networking skills. And networking skills means that you can, because you can't do everything by yourself. So, and sometimes you are leading a community or a group that does not have the answer to the problems you are facing. So, a group, for instance, that doesn't have all the resources it takes to develop a particular technology. But networking means that you can go from that, your group, and then extend a hand to somebody else in another group who has that technology that will solve your problem, or who has the resources that will solve your problem, or who has whatever it is that's going to solve the problem of your own group. So that's networking. Now, we have mentioned interview, we have mentioned networking, we have mentioned leadership, we've mentioned academic performance as well. So all of these kind of things would vary depending on the scholarship. But the key thing is, you are still, for instance, in your university days, and you can find the skills that are common to most of the scholarships, or the experience that's common to most of the scholarships. And then you begin to work on those general ones, and then you can now add the specific ones that are relevant to each of the scholarships you have identified that you are interested in applying for. I did not need to tell any story of my leadership skills to win the scholarship that is funding my PhD, right? Because they don't need it. But if I went there to tell them a story of how I've been a leader without providing evidence of membership of professional bodies, I probably would still be looking for that scholarship till tomorrow. Yeah. So it's specific, but you have some time to go through these scholarships, identify their requirements, because sometimes they don't change. The scholarships are just cyclic. They happen the same way this year. Next year is almost the same thing. They are asking for exactly the same thing. So you identify those things and begin to work on them as possible. Someone else is raising a hand, and that might be, there are two people who have raised their hands. So let's take those two questions, and my time would be running out, unfortunately. So I don't know whose hand was raised first. Brandon, please, you can ask your question. Let's start from you. Okay, it's yeah. So that's, I would accept that that was an oversight, and but if you do everything we've mentioned today, getting a good recommendation will not be a problem for you. Now, recommendations are very valuable for every scholarship you apply for, and it's going to be valuable on one of two stages, or on both stages: when you are applying for the scholarship, or when you are applying for admission into the school where you will now use that scholarship. And recommendation means that you very often they require two or three, and one of those must come from the academia. So your project supervisor or one of your lecturers, preferably your project supervisor. But there's something I want to link up for us. So if you have tried to do a project like during your graduation, and you did a research paper publication from that project, you remember that your professor or your supervisor will be very much involved in that. And the person will be able to give you a recommendation that does not just talk about your classroom academic performance. He will now be able to write a recommendation based on your research skills. And you remember, we've been highlighting that research skills are very important for every graduate scholarship you are applying for. So long as it's a graduate research assistantship, your research skills will be very, very important. And I love graduate assistantships because they are open. Like you will find it in almost every country and for almost every subject area, right? So your recommendation is very important, and that's why you want to keep a very good relationship with your lecturers. Apart from being a good student, you should do your best to have a good behavior and a good attitude towards your colleagues and towards your lecturers, because those recommendations will come. Some of them, they will ask you to upload. Some others, they will ask you to provide the email and contact details of those lecturers, and then they will send them a link they will use to fill your recommendation in your absence. But before you leave your school, I will encourage every one of you to try to get at least 2 recommendation letters, one from your project supervisor and one from your favorite lecturer, or maybe from your HOD. Try to get these recommendations because they become very handy. You can upload them, and sometimes they may not ask for contact details, but even if they ask, then you can reach out to those people, build those good relationships, and maintain good relationships with your lecturers. I still talk to my primary school teachers, by the way. So maintain good relationships, build a good relationship, and maintain it for the long term. They will always help you, especially as somebody who has ambitions to further your education. I hope that was good enough. So, Mohomekem, I don't know if I got that pronunciation correct, but pardon, please go ahead with your question. Okay, so as an undergraduate, you can write a paper and publish it with the support of your lecturers. Um, so the way it works is this: you can do an experiment of something that nobody has done before. If you're able to stretch your imagination to that point, but that might be a bit of stressful. So a good starting point should be to write a literature review. There's something called literature review on a topic. And I don't know the educational system of Cameroon so much, but I would assume that is not so different from what most other countries do. So at the point of your graduation in your last year of school, do you guys do something that's called a graduation project or this? Just confirm in the comments or just answer. Do you do anything that's a project in your final year? So in that project work, do you do something that's called literature review in the write-up when you're writing your project? Okay, so you do more like you construct something and then present in the school. Okay, so this is it. If your department does literature, like you do an actual writing, there's a phase that's called literature review. You write up that literature review means that you are looking at all the other publications within that field, within that topic. What have people done in the past? What did they find? You are trying to write a summary of their findings, and you are trying to analyze those. So you do 3 things basically. You summarize their findings, you analyze and compare their findings, and then you critique their findings and find gaps in knowledge. That's like 4 things. But so when you do that, you can compile that into a journal paper and publish it with all the right references. It's not a very small task to achieve, but you can do it in groups, and that's the easiest way. So you take like 3 people from your team and you form a group. that will write that project or execute that research paper project under the leadership of a professor or the leadership of any lecturer. You approach the lecturer and say, well, we understand that this thing is going to be useful to us in the future, and we are ready to take up the work if you will be available to guide us. Most lecturers will be very open and very happy to do that. So when the person accepts to guide you, then you just take the hard work. You can do it during your holidays. If all of you live within the same area, you can meet once in a week, twice in a week in the writing process, and then you send to the lecturer, he reads through, makes corrections, and send back to you and all that. There are lots of lessons on how to write papers anyways. And sometimes I sponsor people. I sponsored some of my followers. In fact, one of them is from Cameroon. I think her name is Berry. I sponsor people to write to academic writing training sometimes on my Facebook page, but those are like for very loyal followers who engage and all those kind of things. Once in a while, it's not every time, but you do that. Now, for those of you who are from departments that don't write up thesis and do literature reviews, your project work, that thing you are constructing, can form the basis of a paper. So if you're able to, because let's say you are constructing what now? Let's say you're constructing a sample of a grinding machine. Writing up the report of how that grinding machine was constructed. In fact, from how did you come up with the idea of constructing a grinding machine? There was a problem you found maybe in your community that they needed grinding machines that are more efficient or that are cheaper or that are more energy efficient. They don't consume so much energy, or that will run on, instead of petrol, that will run on maybe like diesel or run on solar energy or something. So if you want to write a paper on that project, you can just talk to the project supervisor, and because he will be aware of all the details of the project, he'll be able to guide you on how to write that project up and convert it into a paper. Because papers are not like, they must not be, you must not go to the lab, do this, do that. Some papers are simulation based, some are just literature reviews. And in my experience, the literature review papers I've written have got more citations than all the other papers I've written. So when you write, in fact, recently somebody spoke to me about one of the literature review papers I did, and that conversation might lead possibly to a job. Just because you found that literature review somewhere on the internet, read it, came on LinkedIn, spoke to me. And that's also why you need a very good presence on social media, because you might be doing some work that somebody finds somewhere, and that person needs to trace you to verify that you are who your work says you are. Their first choice of place will be social media. But this is generally the way you approach publications. It could be a literature review, it could be a lab work, it could be a project design, be a simulation, just different things. But at the level of an undergraduate, my first recommendation would be get yourself grouped, maybe like 3 persons or 4, and then speak to a lecturer who will be able to supervise you directly on the execution of that project. Some lecturers will say that they will be the first author at the end of it. Don't bother yourself with it. Accept that position. Let them do it and let them guide you, and you learn in that process practically on how to write it. From your second paper, you can be doing it just by your student group alone. And you'll be amazed at how much you can achieve if you work in groups. You can also do conferences like all these. There are some conferences that are for students, some are for professionals. You can go in there, make presentations, and all of that. I believe that was good enough. Yeah. All right. And that was me for today. I may not be able to take any other questions, but if you have more questions, you can always keep an eye on Academy of Scholarships and Transitions. There's a Facebook page, a YouTube page, a TikTok page, and a WhatsApp group. You can join any of those, and we will be in constant touch, and I'll be able to answer your questions as they come up. Thank you so much for today, and I believe your time was not a waste. I used to say that success is coming, and definitely, if you do the right things, your success will come. Okay, so let me just share the Facebook and let me just share the Facebook and YouTube page immediately in the chat box. Where is it? Okay. So this is our YouTube. Just a moment. Let me get that. So this is our YouTube channel. You can subscribe on the YouTube and basically, well, if you follow me, you would find that you don't waste your time. I don't waste my time on doing frivolous content. I try the much I can to do things that will be helpful to everybody and every one of my followers. And this is our Facebook page. Then you can follow me on LinkedIn too. I don't know how many of us use TikTok, but uh, I don't know. So, well, I'll just share everything. Whichever one fits anybody, you can go there and follow. This is LinkedIn that I've just shared now. And the WhatsApp one, Michael will send it across to you guys because I'm working from a laptop and I don't have WhatsApp on this laptop. So TikTok, let us get that one across so that wherever I go to on social media, you'll find some useful information. So copy link. Yeah, this is it. Yeah, so this is basically everything. YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my personal profile. It's not a page. It's just my personal profile. And the rest of them you can follow across board. Yeah, yeah. Good night and have a very wonderful week as well. I can see Blessing, Brandy, Vikia, Fongan. I'm just trying to see if I can pronounce some of the names. Nelson, uh, Neba. Yeah, just everybody, I wish you well. Thank you so much for having me. Good night and have a very wonderful week.